Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Grant Thornton Bharat's webinar on the need for simplification of TDS tax deduction at source and TCS tax collection at source provisions. The Income Tax Act 1961 contains numerous provisions relating to TDS and TCS. Over the years, the scope of these provisions have expanded manifold. It has been felt that the increasing coverage of the TDS provisions has added to the compliance burden on taxpayers. There is litigation on numerous issues, including interpretational issues in various tax and legal forums. In many cases, taxpayers spend considerable time in assessments and litigations, which has increased the overall cost of doing business. Guidance on various issues is indeed available from the notifications and clarifications that have been issued by the authorities from time to time. In addition, there are numerous decisions by the tribunals and the courts which provide clarity on some of these issues. However, despite all of these supportive measures, taxpayers still face challenges in many cases to take the correct positions on various issues, like even taking a TDS rate to be applied in a particular case. While in the recent past, a lot has been done by the government towards ease of doing business, but we believe there is an urgent need to look at further simplification and rationalization of the TDS and TCS provisions. And that's what our panelists today are going to deliberate on for the next 1 hour. With this, let me introduce you to our panelists. I am Lloyd Pinto, tax partner with Grant Thornton Bharat. I am a chartered accountant with over 19 years of post-qualification experience in the tax and regulatory space. We are joined this evening by Mr. Saurabh Kuvadia, who is head taxation at GlaxoSmithKline Pharmaceuticals Limited. He's a seasoned tax professional with over 20 years of experience in handling complex advisory, compliance, and litigation matters in direct tax, transfer pricing, indirect tax, and international taxation. He has successfully handled complex compliances across several tax jurisdictions, cross-border mergers and acquisitions, and business reorganization. We also have with us today Mr. Riaz Tingna, who is a tax expert with over 35 years of rich experience in tax and regulatory matters. Riaz will be moderating this discussion for us today. Welcome, Riaz. We also have on our panel Mr. Sujay Paul, who is a tax expert with over 18 years of experience in tax and regulatory matters. Sujay focuses on domestic and international corporate tax. Welcome, Sujay. We also have with us Ms. Richa Sawhney, who is a tax expert with over 25 years of experience in tax and regulatory matters. Welcome, Richa. Before I hand over to Richa to give us a brief overview of the issue, a quick housekeeping announcement. There is a Q&A box at the bottom that you may see. If you have any questions for the panelists, please leave them out there in the Q&A box. We will try to take up as many questions as time permits. But if you're not able to take up any questions, we'll surely get back to you as soon as we can. And with this, I hand this over to Richa to give us an overview for the discussion for the day. Thank you.
Thank you, Lloyd. Let's begin by looking at the rationale behind introduction of the TDS provisions. So the objective behind introduction of the TDS provisions was to ensure that tax is collected at the earliest possible stage, and that is the stage of the inception of the transaction. This ensured that a transaction trail is created, which eventually helps in avoiding the cases of underreporting or non-reporting of income. And accordingly, it reduces the chances of any tax leakages. Now, another important objective, and rather a very important objective, has been that TDS ensures that there's a regular collection of taxes throughout the financial year, that is on a monthly basis. Now, when this concept was introduced in the 1922 Act, there were very limited set of sections dealing with TDS, and they dealt primarily with salaries, interest, and interest on securities and dividends. Similarly, in the early years of the current Act also, there were limited provisions dealing with TDS, and that was relating to salary, dividend, and overseas payment. But over the years, the scope of these provisions has expanded manifold. Currently, there are over 3 dozen substantive sections for TDS. There's a huge list of rules and forms associated with compliance. There are tax rates ranging from 0.1% to 40%, and there are different thresholds for different sort of payments. The story in case of TCS is also somewhat similar. Now let's look at how this process works. A person who is responsible for deducting taxes firstly has to figure out the exact nature of the transaction, which means figuring out the exact section, forfeitment, and the rate applicable. There are various interpretational challenges that deductors face at this juncture, which could be, TDS relating to year-end provision, distinction between commission and discount, what constitutes interest, what is a works contract, what is professional or technical fee. Once this threshold is passed and the correct rate is determined, the next step is to deduct and deposit the taxes with the government treasury and within stipulated timelines. This is followed by filing periodic TDS returns and issuance of TDS certificates. All these are time-bound compliances, so the necessary fallout is that non-compliance or delays will lead to interest, stringent penalties, and even prosecution in certain cases. In addition, there are disallowances of expenditure on account of defaults. As far as the deductee is concerned, he can definitely claim the credit of taxes by filing return of income. However, on the practical front, taxpayers face serious challenges in claiming TDS credit or seeking refunds. So result, cash flow issues in many cases. So in nutshell, a lot of time and resources are spent on compliance and litigation. Now, there is no denying that TDS is, yes, an important element of the process of tax collection in India. In fact, it contributes around 30 to 40% of the gross direct tax receipts. For year 2021 and 21-22, the contribution was as high as 45 and 49% respectively. But there is another side to it, and that's the refund part. 15 to 25% of the gross tax collections are refunded. If you work it out as a percentage of TDS, that would range from 35 to 45%. And looking at this issue of the refunds, it was the issuer committee which had noted that over the years, the rates for many categories of taxpayers have actually been reduced. TDS rates and thresholds, however, have not factored in these changes. The result is huge refunds where the government also needs to pay interest. So there is huge administrative cost on the department. The committee had then gone on to recommend rationalization of these provisions. There is also some government data which indicates that it's not that all the sections that are generating a lot of taxes. There are several TDS provisions which even clubbed together contribute less than 1% of the total TDS collections. So it's essentially 3 to 4 sections which contribute a significant part, which is 85% of the total TDS collection. And same is the situation in case of TCS. So this data, it emphasizes the need of streamlining and rationalizing these provisions. There is definitely a need for a relook, an exercise to evaluate what could be done to provide relief to the taxpayers without impacting overall tax collections. With this, I will hand over to Riaz. Over to you, Riaz.
Thank you, Richa, and a very warm welcome to all the participants. So as we all recognize that the importance of TDS as an efficient tool for tax collection. As Richa pointed out, TDS as a mode of tax collection has 3 distinct advantages. You have the highest efficiency and the minimum leakage. You have the quickest and evenly spread cash flow. And finally, you have data collection. Now, some of the stated objectives may not be relevant today. For example, in today's digital world, where the government has access to data from various sources, I guess the role of TDS as a primary source of mapping transaction trails has diminished. With advancement in technology, smooth flow of information between the various government departments, a much wider range of information is today available with the authorities, which may not have been possible earlier. The CBDT has signed memoranda of understandings with various departments, including SEBI, CBIC for exchange of data. And then there are several other sources to track details of transactions undertaken by the taxpayers, banks, financial institutions, the statement of financial transactions or the SFTs, data collated from other government agencies like Ministry of Corporate Affairs, Enforcement Directorate, etc. Notably, even over the last few years, the scope of details to be furnished in the SFT has also expanded exponentially. The statement requires us to furnish details of 16 categories of transactions as opposed to 7 transactions at the time of introduction. Then the new Form 26AS will also cover information in a comprehensive manner and will further assist in gathering information about the taxpayer. So in short, there are various alternatives available whereby the government can assess if any significant transaction remains outside the tax net. On the other hand, over a period of time, we have seen an increasingly complicated compliance path, which is creating an impediment to smooth business operations, contrary to the stated objectives of the government of making business simpler. Hence, the need to revisit the framework to examine whether it's possible to reduce compliances and rationalize the provisions without the concomitant revenue loss. In today's session, we will only discuss domestic TDS provisions, as the tax withholding on foreign remittances will have different complexities and special objectives, and that in fact can be a subject of an entirely separate session. Now, with that background, without wasting any more time, let me just straight jump into picking the brains of this extremely esteemed panel that we have today. I'll start with you, Saurabh. Saurabh, do you believe that the GST ecosystem is the alternative the government should now consider as a primary tool to establish transaction trails? Or do you continue to see TDS as a primary tool for this purpose?
Oh, hi friends. Good afternoon. I think I still feel GST is the law where we provide invoice-wise information. Our data is available, though right now that GST2 is not in active mode and the purchase information data is not available. But what my suggestion is, between all the different law, come up with the one law with all the information details required, which I see from GST point of view, and make that as a database which capture each and every trailing of the transaction of that organizations. It will help us to reduce the cost of compliances. Most of the IT system is not geared up with different type of TDS rates, threshold, and other stuff which are we are grappling today also. But I see one has to see from each respective point of view that one law will be sufficient to capture the information data from the business. So let's take example like when transfer pricing was there, customer was never interacted with the transfer pricing department, but now that data is available with the TPT. So ultimately it's evolving now. They also realize importance of that, and I still feel one has to make it under GST that all the requirement details required in different law will be catered into one. That will save the cost of compliance and the time of the corporates.
No, thanks, Saurabh. That's great. You're clearly advocating the fact that since we have TDS, the GST trail and other sources, we should not be viewing TDS as a tool of collecting data. But continuing on this, what are the key challenges that you face in complying with the TDS provisions? So do you see the need to reduce the compliance burden on taxpayers? For example, the need for the deductor to identify whether the deductee is a non-filer of tax returns and then deduct tax at a higher rate, or any other pain points that you actually face in your role we would love it if you could share that.
TDS provision has mentioned that it's a primary collection of the tax much in advance from the deductor, and it's a big source of revenue for government. So I don't say about that you completely eliminate something or make it, but let's make it very simple. I'll give you the live example of my case where we do not have a system or a field available in the SAP system where we put it's a flyer, non-filing of return. We don't have an option sometimes with a specified rate or a double the rate which is applicable for that, and it's totally depend upon the P2P guys or the user for the application of the mind whether to which options to select. And in one of the case where we outsource this entire P2P functions to the other outsource company where they just blindly apply whatever is there in the master, and then all TDS defaults and notices are started coming to us. So that's a primary challenge I've seen. Every time one and another field it's required to be added into the SAP system, the cost of compliance is very high, and it's totally depend upon the human intervention and human driven rather than the technology driven this.
Great, absolutely. So you realize, I mean, with the kind of complexities, what you're stating is that even with having that clear intent of complete compliance, it is almost impossible with the kind of interpretation and other issues that keep arising.
So I'm not talking about the interpretation issue right now because that is always there with this. If you see most of the IT companies, software selling, whether supply sale or other, but even though we know what is the right provision, we don't have a system to cater that kind of provision and to ensure that we will do the 100% compliance.
So it's even more severe than just interpretation, which we can still accept. Thank you for that, Saurabh. Turning to you, Sujay. In your experience, in which areas have you seen your clients face the maximum challenges? Is it the TDS mismatch or obtaining of a lower withholding tax certificate or something else?
Sure, thanks, Riaz, and good evening, everyone. Really, Riaz, I think as you rightly mentioned in the initial part, with the the growing number of sections being added in the income tax law and specifically focusing on TDS, I think the challenges for corporates have only increased over the years. I think in terms of the issues that we have generally experienced where companies do face the maximum challenges is one, of course, is the reconciliation. So as you know, actually the reconciliation is required at both on the expenditure side as well as on the income side. So when I as a taxpayer is supposed to withhold tax on my payments, at the end of the year there is a reporting requirement under the tax audit report, which requires the company to do a complete detailed reconciliation of the entire the year of compliances under different sections, the rates applied, and the mismatch between the amounts appearing in the financial statements and what's actually there in the TDS return, and to ensure that these sections have been applied appropriately, the rates have been applied appropriately, because the tax auditor eventually is required to report that. So it's a yearly exercise, and based on volume, companies are actually required to do, a lot of times they have to do it on a quarterly basis. So it's a massive exercise which companies are doing, and and therefore it takes a lot of time and effort. Even on the income side, when a company is actually going to claim the TDS it has suffered on where the taxes have been deducted by the customers, there also there is a reconciliation required. Now, while the returns are being filed by the customers and the 26 AS forms do take care or do demonstrate the TDS credit available, having said that, there is always a lot of issues that come up because of the opening of the year end or the year opening issues, and the basis of accounting done by the deductor and the deductee. So these are very standard, and with growing volumes and number of sections being added, I think the reconciliation effort is one of the biggest challenge. The other is, of course, as you mentioned, the lower withholding tax certificates, which Indian corporates do apply for a variety of reasons, because of the effective tax rate being lower than the withholding tax rate, or it's a loss-making company. Now, as per the current provisions of the law, a company needs to apply for these certificates every year. It's a yearly exercise, and even if you make the application well in advance at the start of the financial year, it may take at least 2 to 3 months depending on the volumes and the quantum of transactions, and and then it goes on for the rest of the year. And at the same time, there are parties which will, and each customer will have a different defined amount identified in the certificate. So the companies are also required to keep a track of how much of transactions are happening. And moment the limits are exceeding or about to exceed, they have to either reapply or start withholding at a higher rate, which also needs a lot of intervention on the ERP systems. Now, this is a big pinpoint because the companies are required to currently do this exercise every year. And every year it's a fresh discussion with the tax authorities and the rate being agreed. And as we all know, the rate may not be the same every year. So I think these are top of the two issues which definitely comes in. And of course, there are issues around the overlap currently now with TCS being there on sale of goods. You also have a TDS. So there are a lot of overlaps on the scope and how the companies are going to apply both these provisions. So there's some clarity being provided, but I think it adds on a lot of multiplies the number of compliances and the efforts on the company side.
No, great. Thanks, Sujay. You made a very valid point about the complexity. I think today there are 40 plus provisions in the Act which are dealing with TDS alone. And, so clearly there are a lot of issues that, would arise there and the complexities that come up. But while we are on that, we'll come to the overlap of TDS and TCS later, but any other possible solutions that actually come to mind that would help in dealing with some of the issues that you've raised?
Sure, yeah. So I think one of the, well, I'm sure we'll also discuss some of the other thoughts at the larger structural level on the TDS provisions at large, but I think I want to specifically highlight the one thought around the lower certificates, lower withholding certificates, which a company is required to apply. One thought could be that rather than applying every year, if the government permits that the certificates are negotiated and based on certain assumptions, granted for a more than a year. So could be a 3-year period, could be a 5-year period, depending on what's suitable for a particular industry or the nature of transaction, which will help the company not to renegotiate and go with the process every year. And also give a certainty on the application of that particular rate, subject to some conditions over a period of 3 years at least. That will also save the effort of not only just reapplying and reobtaining, but also monitoring the progress over the period of 3 years. And in any case, if you see even after the lower withholding, the company would be filing its withholding tax return on a quarterly basis, right? So I think that's one of the thought process which, to my mind, would go a long way to reduce the burden and the compliance process.
And maybe even removing the value limit and
exactly. Exactly.
What about the use of maybe TDS ledger system for your reconciliation issues that you?
Yeah, so that is one option which can be explored when it comes to on the reconciliation for the income side. So when a company is claiming the TDS today, on the basis of Form 16 or 26AS, the amounts appearing in there, there are a lot of mismatches, and we have seen that companies do face trouble at the time of assessments where the 26AS is not showing a particular credit, but based on the income recognition criteria, the company is claiming that amount, it may not be allowed on the first go, right? And that leads to a litigation or at least some follow-ups required. Similarly, we have seen the tax authorities actually making an addition on the income based on the fact that, okay, the 26AS TDS is on a higher side, whereas what is claimed in the return is on a lower side. So they can actually pick up the, we have seen a lot of cases where the companies have suffered an addition of income just because the 26AS TDS is on a higher side. I think these are things which can be avoided if one has to look at the TDS credit as a ledger rather than on a year-on-year exercise again. Of course, the ledger option will also needs to be looked at very thoroughly from different situations, like what happens in a loss-making companies, what happens in where the credit is unutilized, it's carried over to the next year. There could be areas that one has to evaluate, but a ledger mechanism, to my mind, would be a good option to explore in this kind of situation. It will give a good amount of relief to the taxpayers.
Great, thanks a lot, Sujay. That was very helpful. Now, having seen the reality on the ground, let's add a bit of international flavor to this. And let me turn to you, Lloyd. So what has been your experience regarding the way TDS provisions work in other parts of the world, like US, UK? Are they used as widely as in India, or what are the highlights that come to mind?
Sure, sure. Thanks, Riaz. So let me give you some flavor of how the domestic withholding regime works, specifically in the US. Of course, one has to appreciate that it's a very uh, comparatively different economy, well developed, and the tax mechanism there, is quite different to what we have here. And they operate a lot on a trust-based mechanism, so they're not using TDS as a primary tool, at least to try trace transactions on a domestic basis. So between domestic taxpayers within the US, in fact, there is no domestic withholding tax. The entire withholding tax regime is largely international. When I'm talking about the US, the US interactions with international companies, that's where the bulk of the withholding taxes come into play. Domestically within the US, they have a very simplistic regime. It works like an annual information reporting system, and they have identified categories which they deem to be high risk, right? So between corporates to corporates, there is no reporting also required, but specifically when it comes with regard to payment to individuals, that's a very specific category where they want detailed reporting. And they've highlighted whole set of categories where they want companies to send in what is called a 1099 statement. It is called an information statement, both to the IRS as well as a payee. So it's an annual compliance for most companies. They have to identify payments made by them during the year to individuals, to certain categories of recipients. At the time of transaction, all they require from the payees is a tax certificate. It is basically a one-page document specifying that here is our tax identification number. So if it's an individual, it's an SSN. If it's a corporate, it's an EIN. You are basically obtaining the responsibility of the payer is to take on record the tax identification number of the payee. And as long as the payee has volunteered that information, there is no domestic withholding required. And for any reason, let's say the corporate does not get the tax identification number, only in that case, and there is a single rate that is applied. It is called a backup withholding rate. It's a 28% rate. So it's not complicated in that sense. If you get tax ID information from the payee, there will be no withholding, only an annual requirement to send in information to the tax authorities. On a day-to-day basis, it's merely to ensure that adequate documentation is maintained. Again, this documentation is internal to the company. It does not have to be filed with the tax authorities every year. But yes, in case of an assessment, if the corporate taxpayer is audited by the tax authorities, they will look at information collected by the corporate to determine whether or not they have met their requirements with regard to domestic withholding. So that's how it typically works in the US. Largely international. Domestically, it's mainly working on an annual information system. The primary tool for collecting taxes is through the advanced tax mechanism and not really the TDS mechanism. Back to you, Riaz.
Great, Lloyd. That is really interesting to learn, especially since we were just earlier discussing about the burden that the deductor has in India, and as compared to that situation, especially in the US, seems to be far more evolved. Any other best practices that you may like to touch upon, which could be imbibed and brought into our environment?
So I think from a best practice perspective, I think the one thing that and I've seen professionals who work on like Saurabh, who work with multinationals dealing with several countries, I think is the simplification of the tax rates. I think we have just too many categories and too many different tax rates. Even if there is a reduction in the categories or even a unification of tax rate, I think that also helps a lot, because a lot of litigation we have is in India is also on what tax rate should we apply. Taxpayers may agree on yes, there is a need to withhold TDS, but there is a dispute on what is the applicable, tax rate. So that's where both domestically and internationally, the US is pretty simple. They have one rate for domestic withholding, that's 28%, and they have a single rate for all international withholding, that's 30%. Yes, whatever tax treaties are applicable, they will reduce the tax, the TDS withholding to the appropriate rates. But domestically, they are just functioning with just two rates. I think that simplifies and makes life easy for a lot of tax professionals. I think that's something that we could look at imbibing, if not a single rate, and at least coming down to a very limited number of rates and categories. I think that would be pretty helpful.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for those insights, Lloyd. Now coming to you, Richa. As Sujay was also mentioning, we have more than 40 sections in the Act dealing with TDS and a whole lot of disputes and litigation, mainly arising due to interpretation issues, etc. So what, in your opinion, could there be, could the government do and options be taken up to reduce such disputes and litigation, whether fewer sections or simplified rate or carve out for the small taxpayers? I would like your insights into this, Richa.
Yeah, thanks, Riaz. So I think one thing that can be possibly done is that basis the current data available with the government, TDS sections could possibly be categorized in three parts. The first set of sections, which one could think of retaining, are those key 3 or 4, 5 sections where the collections are really high, say 85 to 90%. And basis the current data available, probably that would be salaries, TDS on professionals, interest, and the contractors. So maybe these are the areas where these sections they could continue. We could retain them. The second category of sections could be the ones which could be deleted. We have seen that there are, in many cases, there are sections which contribute a minuscule portion, but they add a lot to the compliance side. So maybe those set of sections could be identified and deleted, and especially the ones which collectively contribute, say, less than 1% or around 2% of the total contributions. The third category which one could consider is the areas where you cannot get information from other alternative sources. So in that case, you could possibly use TDS as a trail to establish transaction trail. But then taking cue from what Lloyd just mentioned, I think here to reduce litigation, it will be really nice if the rates could be, say, one or two rates. You could have just 0.1% and or 1%, because the intent here is only to establish the transaction trail. So now I think all these things put together will meet the twin objective of, one, creating a log in all cases, but on the other side, reducing litigation on the rate determination and the interpretational side of it. Also, currently, the challenge that taxpayers face is that for different set of transactions, there are different thresholds, and they have not really been revised over a period of time, so they are on the lower side. So that is something that could be considered. And in fact, this is something the issuer committee also kind of highlighted. And similar exercise, I believe, could be carried out basis the data available for TCS provisions. And yes, there should be something which could be done for the medium and the small taxpayers. So for SMEs, and a uniform threshold, first of all, to be established of what constitutes an SME in all laws. And maybe some carve out be provided so they are kept out of the purview, and therefore the compliance burden on these set of taxpayers is reduced. So I guess these are few things that could be done, which probably will not impact too much of the tax collections, but provide a lot of relief to taxpayers.
Yeah, that's interesting, because from the figures that you had also put up right in the beginning of the session, I think in 2021, almost 50% of the amount collected had been refunded. So that if that is the case, there is a clear need to at least ensure that we reduce the administrative burden and cash flow by rationalizing the rates, so to say. Great, thank you very much. Coming back to you, Saurabh, we are increasingly hearing from our clients that the compliance costs and the overall burden on the taxpayer is becoming more and more difficult and harsh. Any specific issue that you would like to talk about, whether it is on cash flow, compliance costs, penalties, disallowances, any of those issues that you would specifically like to highlight as a pain point?
So let's take a live case in my company only. Being a SAP system, we make up expenses provision as in 31st March year end. And now there are certain process in the system where PO, invoice book, everything is required so that your TDS entry will get reflected into the TDS register, and based on that you file the TDS return. But it's a provision amount, and in provisions amount deducting a TDS, paying a money from out of the pocket, and subsequently when we receive the actual invoices from the vendor, how we marry that both the amount, is there any difference, who will take that difference, whether they will able to claim that not. So we have a big litigations on that part for the year end provisions. And now under GST law, which says that if invoice is not there, you cannot book in the vendor account and it will automatically get reflected in the GST register. So this is all practical challenges we see. And today now to find out that solution after so many big litigations, we are keeping entire records in the Excel file. We pay appropriate TDS amount based on the vendor and track subsequently in a year what bill actually utilized, and against that we marry the number. A lot of manual work. It is a human driven, the people driven rather than the process, and it's a big challenge for us. I believe this year end provision is a big challenge for many industries, and being a SAP system, everything controlled globally, we have a very limited window to post the entry to account that particular expenses for a year and other stuff. I think I see that's it's a biggest challenge for us
Mhm.
and the system. And for TDS also, I always feel I don't agree fully with the Richa which says a small taxpayer why they want to do compliance and all. Make it simple. Instead of 194C with 1%, 2% corporate, non-corporate, non-flyer, make it very simple. Remove the threshold. Say this is the amount payable, which one section. That's all. You don't have to go into the nitty-gritty and the user has to pay whether it is exceeding threshold. And the live example with the HO, the accounts payable team book, where we have a different MOPs in the manufacturing location where the same vendor invoice get booked and no one know what is the limit, whether it is crossing, not crossing. So that's a practical challenge, and we've taken us some measures being a company when people will surprise knowing that we don't give benefit of lower deduction, we don't follow threshold. We're very strict about the TDS particular, that this is the amount, and before giving any purchase order we mention everything in the PO very clearly that our system is not geared up for all these things. And that's how we manage the compliance. Otherwise it's a big litigation. I've seen a demand notice of 3 crore 5 crore coming every quarterly, and then the people have started questioning and all. So that's the
And
challenge. I say it's a practical challenge for us.
so I guess the vendors may not be that happy with this when you say that we would take the lowest thing, but I guess that is a direct result of such harsh compliance requirements. So that there is no way in which one can actually comply unless you take the strict and narrow path. So I think that's an important outcome that you're pointing out. That is where we need to really relook at the provisions. Uh, Sujay, coming back to you, so you spoke about the TDS and TCS overlap. So, while the government has clarified that 194Q will take precedence over 206C, so in other words, TDS will take precedence over TCS, but I understand that various difficulties continue. And what is your experience on this, and any particular solutions that come to mind?
So Riaz, I think while you rightly said the government has definitely clarified that the TDS on sale of goods will prevail over TCS where applicable. I think the challenges still remain, fundamentally TDS is actually applicable on either accrual or payment, whichever is earlier, whereas TCS is essentially on collection basis. Now, practically when a company is actually raising an invoice on sale of goods, if it is required to apply TCS, it should be putting it as a part of the invoice, and that's the general practice that we have seen companies do following. Now the question arises that at the year end, when you have already raised an invoice and maybe you have probably not paid the TCS because it's not yet collected, then and in the next year when you are evaluating the applicability and the collections for the past years are done, so you might have actually incurred a liability much later, and therefore you incur some interest element on that. That's one issue which keeps happening in certain companies. I think the other is that while very fundamentally, if it is proved and if it is clarified that TDS should prevail, then why do we really need TCS on sale of goods? Because while the company, one payer may say, okay, I'm required to withhold tax, and that's the primary responsibility of the deductor while making a payment. But if he fails to do so, then TCS definitely becomes automatically applicable because the TDS has not been done on that sale transaction. So then the liability moves on to the collector and on the seller, and then the seller is required to again pay an interest or and do a subsequent compliance of the section. So I think this kind of issues do come up, and therefore both parties are required to take enough declarations, which are again just declarations on based on interactions, but still live with the risk of some non-compliance creeping in at some point in time in the overall year. So I think it will be good for the government to kind of reconsider the rationale for the TCS on sale of goods. And if there is enough data available through GST returns, through other transaction details, and of course there is a TDS also on that transaction, then completely do away with the TCS provision is probably one of the greatest demand of the corporate today.
No, absolutely. I mean, it is asking for too much if the seller has to keep track of whether the buyer has deducted tax or not, and then accordingly apply TCS. I think we are putting too much burden on the seller in transactions. But in terms of these new TDS provisions, the section 194O, any challenges that you're facing on those?
Yeah, I mean, 194O again is a new section which has been applicable for e-commerce operators. Now, practically, e-commerce is all around. I think we are in a world where technology has taken significant space in the way business is done. So I think again, while the idea is to really look at, the idea of getting 194O was essentially to curb the or kind of bring under the tax net those sellers on e-commerce platforms which were small sellers, and therefore they're not paying taxes otherwise, and therefore collate some data. But I think the way the section has been worded, the way the definitions of e-commerce operator, e-commerce participant, I think it's cast a very wide net on the entire the way the section is applicable. So it can actually apply to variety of situations, So today, whether it is a pure e-commerce operator or if it is a payment platform or it's a any other kind of business which has got some e-commerce intervention, they have to examine the applicability of the section. Again, there are and again the way the section has to be applied to different business model. I think with advent of technology, the business models have undergone significant change. Day to day, different kind of business models are coming in, and all of them have to be looked at to see whether 194O compliance is required or the normal provisions of income tax would apply. I think, I mean, it's definitely a new, a compliance or a new application of TDS which has to be seen from the e-commerce perspective, the industry perspective.
Thank you, Sujay, for that. Richard, I'll come to you again. Just carrying forward from what we had discussed earlier on some of the suggestions that you made. So primarily, we have to ensure that whatever suggestions or proposals that we put up, there would be simplification, but yet there should be no loss to the government. We also spoke about the Ishwar Committee report, some suggestions, and the reference to the the administrative burden and the cost that is involved. So with this background and the fact that a significant part of the collection is refunded, should TDS rates be reduced, number one. And if they are reduced, the impact on the revenue collection is going to be significant. So that's something that we have to look at. And any other suggestions that we can have broadly for the rationalizing of these provisions overall?
Yeah, Riaz. So I think first of all, it is important that we do retain those 3 or 4 sections which contribute majorly, because in any case that ensure that throughout the year evenly the tax collections are there. Now, as far as the other sections which could possibly be done away with or reduced or consolidated, in my view, there's not going to be much impact on the overall tax collections, because it's all interlinked with the advance tax. Any shortfall on account of these sections which is removed, it will possibly get reflected in the increased advance tax collections. And why I say so is that whenever there is an entity which is working out its advance tax liability at any while before any installment, they would take into account, or they will estimate the total tax liability. They will reduce the TDS that is there already collected, and then they will, on the balance part of it, the advance tax is paid. So if there is at any point of time any shortfall or any reduction on account of any sections going away, or the rates being lowered, that would automatically get factored in the advance tax workings. Now, the other thing that possibly could be done here is that maybe for the larger taxpayers, the number of installments could be tweaked, taking into account the feedback from the larger corporates. They could think of having the advance tax maybe 6 installments or more. So that again would ensure that there is an even collection. As far as the smaller taxpayers are concerned, maybe they can continue with a similar sort of arrangement, the same number of advance tax installment. And I think this would also, to a great extent, solve the problem on the refund side. And that would be because when an entity is paying taxes suo moto in form of advance taxes, they factor in a lot of things. They would factor in, if you have losses, the current year progress of business, how the business is doing in that particular year, if there are any incentives, any other challenges which are there. So all these they would possibly factor in when they are making the suo moto deposit of taxes. So the chances of overpayment and then seeking refund gets sizably lowered in that case. These sort of factors typically do not get factored in when you are looking solely to TDS as a tool of collection of taxes, because these would not flow into the system, and the deductor won't really take these into account for TDS deductions. So I think these are something which could possibly ensure that there is no loss to the government, there is even collection of taxes, but the taxpayers do get some form of a relief. And in fact, the data that we initially looked at, where it talked about the percentage of refund, to my mind, the major chunk of it is coming from TDS only, because advance tax, most of the organizations will do take into account the TDS already collected, and then only the advance tax is deposited. So the 40% to 50% refund is actually stemming on account of the excess TDS collections only. So I think these things put together will go a long way in reducing the compliance burden while ensuring that there is no loss to the government.
So you are actually suggesting a combination of reduction of the number of sections, tweaking the advance tax payments to take care of any shortfalls, and thirdly also tweaking the rates to make them more realistic. So you have a combination of all these 3 things that you think would help. Saurabh, again coming to you, this whole thing about TDS certificates. Is the need to issue the Form 16A and 27A with the concomitant penal provisions, etc. What is your view on it? Can that be done away with today? Is it necessary? Does it serve any purpose?
So Riaz, from past so many years, we refer AS 26 statement, which give, and I believe the assessing officer, tax officer give credit only if the correct credit is reflected in AS 26. I've seen a Form 16A issuing by the people, or we also issue from the system, but we never reconcile any number or any Form 16A for our particular books ledger or AS 26. We rely AS 26 number will be the final number which we reconcile with the ledger account. So I think it is an additional burden for everyone to issue the TDS certificate and then follow up also whether received, not received, or something like that. But normally we don't follow. Now I'm sure most of the large corporates, they rely only on AS 26 statement, and based on that we can claim the credits. I think now we have to go done away with this Form 16A, 27, and when we talk about the annual information, AS 26, everything is digitalized, everything is available and all. I think it is an additional burden for the tax deductor.
Yeah, I mean, I wonder what purpose it serves and why is it still within the statute books? Can you think of any particular benefit that it actually delivers at today with the kind of the complete data collation system that we have?
I think with so many issues, someone has missed out this point and one has to push very hard, because ultimately no one is practically following that. Just by sending and keeping in the file, not never able to reconcile or to see also whether it is correctly issued and all. Even assessing officer says only S26 statement, if the credit is available, you are entitled for that. So I've seen even income tax officers also never ask for the Form 16A. And I think some another way it is missed out and it is an additional burden for us.
Great. Thank you for that. Now I'll quickly go around the table actually, and if you were to speak about one or two primary asks in your opinion, so that we need to bring into the system to achieve the rationalization the factor as well as contribute to the ease of doing business. So Saurabh, first with you, your top two asks or top one ask.
Keep one only, either TDS on the purchase of goods or TCS, and make it very simplify. So there is no need to take confirmations and other stuff. And second, rationalize the rates and don't put it so many corporate, non-corporate, different rates, non-flyer, different rates, or something with the threshold criteria. Make it very simplify so that everyone can do the compliance easily.
Great, thank you. Very well put. Sujay? Top
So
two
Riaz,
asks.
for me, the top is of course removal of TCS on sale of goods. No need for duplicity of any TDS and TCS on sale of goods, as Saurabh also said. I think the second ask for me would be going for a more wider lower tax certificates, the 197 certificates which are currently being only for an annual basis. Make it at least for a 3-year period, subject to certain conditions. So I think these are two of my top asks which I'll like to present.
Thank you, Sujay. Richa?
So Riaz, I think for me, one of the suggestions that Sujay alluded upon, the concept of TDS ledger. I think that is something, if implemented, can do away with a lot of time and effort that corporates spend on reconciliations. And it's essentially, carrying forward the same amount, and you could do away with a lot of litigation, refund related challenges if something like this can be done. Of course, the finer points can be worked out, but that's a beautiful concept that one could really think of. And the other is, of course, reduction in the number of sections, and having just a few set of rates, so that there is interpretational challenges could be reduced. You don't have to refer to figure out that your transaction it's in one of those 40 plus sections. Where does it actually fit in? To have the knowledge of these ever expanding sections, I think that is something that could really help the taxpayers. And of course, though I'm sure the larger corporates won't really agree to it, I would say reduce burden for the small taxpayers. So that would be one of the other asks.
Thank you, Richa. Finally, Lloyd?
Yeah, I echo my fellow panelists' view. For me, I think that the top ask is, simplicity and rationalization. If we can remove, as Saurabh alluded to, the different thresholds, categories, and just keep it simple. If it's taxable, it is taxable at X rate. My sense is the compliance will go up, and the burden on taxpayers will be greatly simplified. So I think rationalization and keeping things simple is a top ask from me.
Thank you. Thank you, Lloyd. We may have a couple of minutes. I'll try to go through some of the question and answers. And, there is one, I'm just trying to see. One question is the monthly TDS applicable or mandatorily required? Sujay? Okay.
So yeah, I think as the TDS as a concept is, the law prescribes a monthly deposit of TDS. So basically, the transactions which have happened in a particular month where TDS is required to be deducted is done in that month, and deposit is done before the 7th of the next month. So really, the deposition of taxes on TDS is on a monthly basis, though the return filing and all is on a quarterly basis.
There is one question which says it's a compliance check which we do for identifying whether vendor is specified person or not. Do we have to do this only one time? Richa?
Sorry, was it meant for me?
Yeah, if you could.
Yeah. So yes, I think there are some clarifications which have been given by the government in this connection. And it seems to suggest that in most cases, you possibly need to do a check only once a year. So I think that does solve the problem to some extent. But in my view, this is something that should be totally given a relook at. And is it really necessary to actually, pass this responsibility on the deductor to check regarding the compliance of the pay? So to my mind, that's a more larger question which we should make a representation to the government for, that maybe this is something that deserves a relook, and something like this need not be passed on to the taxpayers, which already are they already have a lot of compliance challenges with them already.
Thank you. I think we'll have time for just one more. I'm just reading this out. I'd like to know the validity of the notification 21/2012 for sale of software acquired in subsequent transfer without any modification. Whether nil deduction can be applied on the software purchase based on the declaration submitted by the service provider. As a purchaser, I would like to know if there will be any tax liability on applying nil TDS deduction based on the declaration shared by the supplier. Who would like to take this item?
So yeah, Riya, so basically, if I understand the question correctly, I think this circular definitely is valid today. It's still valid and it's applicable when it comes to the chain of transaction on software sale and purchase. So if the transaction has suffered TDS either under 195 or any other domestic section in first leg, then based on that declaration, you don't need to withhold tax in the subsequent leg. So I think, yeah, conceptually the section, the particular relaxation is still there, as well as this can be applied through the declaration taken from in the prescribed manner from the earlier transaction holders.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you. I think we are completely out of time. So whatever other questions are there, we will try to reach back and get back to you with the answers and our comments. So thank you to all the panelists for an extremely engaging discussion. To sum up, yes, there are numerous challenges which are in fact being faced by the taxpayers, but it may be possible to reduce compliances and litigation without impacting the revenue collection, as has been pointed out by our panelists time and again. There's unanimity across the panelists on one point, that a relook at the TDS and TCS provisions is absolutely necessary and the need of the hour. I think to summarize some of the key recommendations, one is that focus on GST ecosystem and other data sources to establish a transaction trail as compared to only using TDS for that purpose. Second one was that they increase the number of advanced tax installments to ensure regular collection of tax. Third, limit the number of TDS provisions, have lesser number of rates, and reconsider thresholds if required. Next one was on the TDS ledger possibility has to be considered. Overlap of TDS and TCS needs to be looked into. And finally, doing away with the issuance of tax withholding certificates in Form 16A, 27A, etc. So thank you once again for an extremely interesting session, and thank you to all the participants for taking out the time and attending this webinar. Thank you very much.